Sark has wasted no time tapping into the transfer portal. Let's go into the new transfers and see which positions needed more depth. Ian A. Boyd of Inside Texas is stopping by to break down the latest addition and how they benefit our new schemes. Go subscribe to Inside Texas for top-notch insider info. Make sure to read the Flyover Football Board on Inside Texas for coverage of our Big 12 competitors. Last Stand Hats is giving you 10% off your next hat purchase if you use promo code TexasHomer, all caps, on laststandhats.com. As always, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so I can keep bringing you bigger and better Texas Longhorns content. Now, without further ado, let's get into it. What's up, Ian? Thanks for stopping by, man. You ready to talk transfers?
Yeah, I'm excited to come on. It's been a really wild year for the portal with all the rule changes and then the new staff.
The portal is wide open nowadays with the new transfer rules. It allows coaches to try to patch positions to improve immediately, opposed to having to wait a year. So what have we seen out of Sark in the new portal? Why is he utilizing the portal so often in his first year?
In today's college football game, you keep seeing the salaries stack up for these guys. Sark making only $5 million a year for now. I think we all know that if and when he wins like the Sugar Bowl next year, it'll go up to $7 million or something silly. But his staff, $1.9 million per year for Kwiatkowski, $1 million a year for Banks. These salaries are inflating a ton, and facilities are inflating. There's pressure, big money pressure to win immediately at every program. It's not just a Texas thing. It's not just Texas fans or boosters getting impatient. The expectation when you make a big hire in college football is that you win immediately. So people don't want to wait around and hear about how your roster doesn't have the pieces you need. I think that pressure has actually been a big part of what has led to the transfer portal is coaches get increasingly desperate. They encourage players to transfer, and then the player agency is almost like a smokescreen to cover up for the fact that the business of the game demands that coaches be recruiting players to their roster well beyond high school. So that's the environment today. That's the game that Oklahoma plays at the highest level in the country, probably. And Sark is not naive to the expectations and to the way the game is played. So he's in the portal, and he is looking to stock up his roster immediately.
I love the new portal rules, man. It's wild. But it does allow you to solve problems that traditionally took a year to solve, so that's nice. The biggest position group that benefited from the portal were the linebackers. Why were we so low on linebackers in general?
Coming in, Sark was coming into a defensive roster that had been already in the process of being transformed. Todd Orlando came in. He was building Texas towards being a 3-down defense. He was not recruiting a lot of edge players, and when he wasn't playing them consistently on the edge. A lot of times Texas's base defense with Todd Orlando was 3 legitimate big defensive linemen, 2 inside linebackers, and 6 defensive backs. Chris Ash comes in. He's running a 4-down, and he's looking for big guys on the edge to play defensive end, even though it's a 4-down defense. So he starts trying to quickly remake the roster in recruiting, but still in a direction that was not quite where it is now under Pete Kwiatkowski. So Steve Sarkisian arrives, and the only true outside linebacker defensive end player on the roster is heading off to the NFL. And he's bringing in Pete Kwiatkowski to run a 2-4-5, where you need 4 linebackers on the field in your base defense. And they're, just barely filling out their inside linebacker core by like moving guys like DeMarvion Overshawn to inside linebacker. So there was an immediate need if they were going to run anything close to Pete Kwiatkowski's desired base defense to fill out an entire 2-deep from the transfer portal. And so that's what they've been aiming to do.
Yeah, needing 4 linebackers on the field at all times is double the amount of the normal linebackers we had. And we were already low at that position to begin with. Let's take a look at the inside linebackers first. What do the positions require and how are we looking there?
So on the inside, the preferred nomenclature now seems to be off-ball linebackers as opposed to your end players. Texas uses 2. It's much like any other school, 3 down or 4 down. People usually tend to have a strong inside linebacker. For Texas, that's the Mike, and then a weak inside linebacker, and Texas calls that position the dime. Mike Will, Sam Mike, people use a lot of different terms, but for Texas, yeah, the wide side off ball linebacker, and then the short side of the field off ball linebacker. And Texas is in much better shape here. They finally moved Overshone to that spot last year. He got his feet wet last year playing the position. Definitely had some growing pains. I think most Texas fans noticed how often he flashed and looked athletic at that spot. If you look closely, you'll also see some really ugly stuff too. But good chance he cleans that up and has a really good year. And then Orlando, later in his time as the defensive coordinator at Texas, really started to adjust recruiting with guys like, DeGabriel Floyd would have been amazing, but obviously injury issues. David Benda, though, is another perfect profile Big 12 inside linebacker, stout and effective in the middle of the field, but with range to run sideline to sideline. And then obviously the walk-on Luke Brockermeyer seems likely to play a significant role this season as well. The funny thing about Brockermeyer, he's at the top of the depth chart right now, first or second string, we'll see. But his strengths and weaknesses are not really what you'd expect from a walk-on. The reason he's there is partly because of injuries, or they missed on Paulier now Teote, the USC transfer that they thought they were going to get, and then ended up going to Ohio State instead. He probably would have played the dime position, which is more of a downhill inside guy. The wide side guy is usually more your athlete. So they missed out on him, which makes Brockermeyer one of the higher guys in the depth chart. But he doesn't have a normal walk-on profile. He's not Court Jakes. He's not the big, slow, smart, sturdy guy. He's one of the faster linebackers on the team. He's faster than a lot of the linebackers Texas has started in the last few years. It may be more the lack of pop, taking on blockers. That's a little more his issue. And that's actually the same issue for Benda, who came to Texas at like 5'11", 198 or something, and he's now 5'11", 215 or some such. DeMarvion Overshone, obviously 6'3", 6'4", 215 pounds, maybe 220, dripping wet. So that's where they're at with that position. They finally have the athletes that Texas has always needed. They're actually missing a little bit of the downhill pop. So that's something that they've been looking for in the transfer portal, but they have not yet secured.
What transfers have we landed to plug those holes? I know we pulled Devin Richardson from New Mexico State, and then we were in the hunt for a couple others. So what's the deal there?
Now Teote, the USC linebacker, would have been perfect. 6'2", 250 pounds. Very quick first step. Not a sideline to sideline guy, but Texas wouldn't have asked him to do it. He would have been the ideal guy, just taking on guards and blowing things up inside while playing next to Overshone or Benda. But, he went off to the greener pastures of the Big Ten, where taking on fullbacks and tight ends is a little more in the job description. So that's a miss. Shadrach Banks is another guy that projected there potentially. Although, anytime you're trying to turn a star receiver into a brute in the box, it's, the body may be capable, but is the mind willing? We'll find out at TCU apparently. But he was another guy with big time athleticism, might have played at 6'1", 235 or something like that. They did get Devin Richardson from New Mexico State. Devin Richardson is very strong at the point of attack. He can take on blockers. He knows where to be. He can get his hat in the right spots on quick reads against the run. But if there's any amount of space for the skill player to work in, he is limited in terms of his mobility. And he can be made to look pretty bad if he has to try to tackle guys in space. It's also possible he's, I think, 6'3", 230 pounds right now. We'll see how big he is once he gets to campus. With his strength and length, it's possible that he'll spin down to outside linebacker, maybe even jack, I think. Because I don't know if he has a lot of explosiveness around the edge, but at jack linebacker, he might be able to fill out to 250, 260, play inside. be an inside shade against a tight end, maybe even a tackle, and be able to hold up.
The next set of linebackers are the outside linebackers that play on the line like a defensive end. Can you give a quick breakdown of what the X backer and the jack do in our new defense? Like, what are the traits that we're looking for?
The confusing thing in Pete Kwiatkowski's defense is that the jack is the strong outside linebacker. So they line up to the field. Sometimes they are shaded inside of a tight end or even a tackle. And sometimes they're out on the edge like you would expect an outside linebacker to be. But that position has to be versatile. It's a true defensive line outside linebacker hybrid position. He needs to be strong at the point of attack, able to set the edge. This is probably the trickiest part to fill for Texas, just because you need a legitimately good defensive end, and Texas hasn't even used the defensive end position consistently for a few years. And then the weak outside linebacker position is called the X. That's what most teams would call a jack, which is the really confusing part. For Texas, it's the X. And this is one of the easiest positions to fill on a football field. You want a really good athlete there, but you want a good athlete there because that position is so easy to set up in the pass rush. You can play him off the ball some. You can use him to blitz from different angles. So any good athlete who with a knack for getting to the quarterback can really shine there. And you'll see, you know, undersized guys thrive there, like an Eric Stryker, or a big guy can play there too if he's good. So that'll be the easier position to fill. The trick for the Texas this year will probably be filling in the jack position.
I love the new scheme, dude. And the fans know we've been bringing in a lot of outside linebackers. Ray Thornton from LSU, Ovia Gufo from Notre Dame, and Ben Davis from Alabama. So what are their skill sets, and do they project to a jack or an X backer?
I think it's possible Texas will start transfers at both outside linebacker positions. Ray Thornton is really strong at the point of attack. He's a good pass rusher, but and he played a little bit of outside linebacker at LSU. He played a little bit of inside linebacker at LSU, and then last year they had him. Ultimately, he was playing as like a 3 technique on passing downs, which is strange, but he was effective at it. He's strong. He's been strong at Texas. He's been good against the run. So he's probably the most well-rounded, strongest outside linebacker on the team. He played at X mostly in the spring and in the spring game, but I think there's a good chance he could move to jack and maybe knock Jacoby Jones down to second string. The incoming transfers are probably the other incoming transfers who haven't practiced yet are probably going to be easier fits at X backer because it's the easier position to fill in general. So OVO from Notre Dame, exactly the kind of guy that this defense is designed to be able to maximize. He's athletic, he has a good motor, but he lacks a little bit of length and he lacks strength. And so he was running third string at Notre Dame, even though he was an athletic pass rusher who would get sacks in garbage time regularly. But he couldn't crack the starting rotation because he wasn't strong and developed enough to beat out the other guys in the roster. He'll have a chance at Texas. His competition will be maybe Ray Thornton if he sticks at X backer, but probably Ben Davis from Alabama. Ben Davis, big guy, looks like he could be a jack because he's like 6'4", 250 or 260 now. But Alabama, for the first 3 years he was there, they had him at inside linebacker, probably because they had some issues there with depth a few years back that they finally resolved. So they had him there for a while. He had some injuries. He doesn't play outside linebacker until much later in his time in Alabama. And by the time he did, he had already been, passed up by the next wave of Nick Saban 5-stars. So he played a lot of third string outside linebacker for Alabama last year. Promising, a little bit new to the position, but he knows how to drop in coverage. He knows how to set the edge from an outside linebacker spot. There'd be a lot of overlap between what he did at Alabama and what he would do at X-backer. So I think he might be, if Thornton moves to jack, I would say Ben Davis is perhaps the favorite to start at X-backer.
And we should be done pulling linebackers out of the transfer portal unless some elite guy just falls in our laps. We have heard a lot of questions from the fans about wide receivers. Sark has said we need to improve at that position. So, what are we needing at wide receiver? And how does the Xavier Worthy transfer help fill that gap?
Texas has a lot of wide receivers on campus. Sark has actually said they have probably too many wide receivers on campus. One way to solve that in the era of the transfer portal is to focus on bringing in elite talents that can play, and then you drive some of those guys out who are looking for playing time. But that means that Texas, they're not going to take Tariq Black and Brendan Schooler through the transfer portal before the season. They have plenty of guys of that caliber or better. Although, should be noted, Brendan Schooler's looking mighty good at safety. But they're not going to take guys like that. They are aiming very high at wide receiver. Um, I think everybody would feel better if they could find a surefire starter, catch 70 balls, go for 800 to 1,000 yards next season, year one transfer. But those are hard to find, obviously. If you have that kind of potential, why wouldn't you just do it at the school you're already at? How many guys have that potential and are waiting for their turn, and are not going to getting the opportunity? So very tricky to navigate that. Um, and it doesn't look like they've been able to find someone that fits that bill. They did get Xavier Worthy. Xavier Worthy, I actually heard about this first from the Michigan side of things. A Michigan guy contacted me and was like, you know, you hearing this about Sark pulling Worthy out of Michigan? And I was like, who? Whoops, he plays wide receiver? Tell me more. And I learned that Michigan was very, very excited about Xavier Worthy. Very excited. It was all they could do to beat Sark in Alabama for his commitment in recruiting, because he profiles like the next Devontae Smith. He's long, 6'1", 155 pounds, maybe something ridiculous, but strong. 10.55, 100 meters as a sophomore in high school. So you're talking elite track speed, good hands, translates to the football field. Um, I don't know how quickly it will translate to the field in college, especially in Sark's offense, which is asks these guys to learn a variety of different routes for a variety of different positions. But his talent could get him on the field immediately at Texas. And even if it doesn't, it was a huge win in recruiting. Can you imagine if Tom Herman had been able to go into the transfer portal a couple months after arriving at Texas and retroactively adding a blue chip talent to the 2017 recruiting class? I mean, I argued this on Inside Texas. I think Tom Herman might still be the coach if he'd been able to do that. If he'd been able to recruit a receiver of Worthy's caliber in the same class as Sam Ellinger, and then in 2019, when Colin Johnson is in and out of the lineup, and you have this guy who's a junior, third-year player that could have stepped in, a guy that could have been the number one guy in 2020 when Texas didn't have anyone that could be the number one receiver. Man, what a huge game changer that is. And so Worthy, even he's a sort of transfer. I don't know if he'll play immediately at Texas or if he'll play a huge role immediately at Texas. But to me, he might be the most important addition that Sark has made, because he allowed him to sort of backfill the roster as if he had been recruiting the roster before he even arrived.
Another big fan question is about the offensive line. So, why isn't Flood taking O line transfers? What's the word on that? Do we actually need the transfers there?
The offensive line is a very difficult position to recruit to in the transfer portal for Texas right now because, um, with the COVID exemption, they got another year out of Derek Kerstetter and Denzel Okafor. They have up and coming talents like Junior Angelau, Jake Majors, and Christian Jones. So if you are a top level transfer who's coming after the spring to Texas, you have to come in and compete with one of these guys for a spot in the depth chart. Like, these schools, so they will recruit guys and say, like, hey, the depth chart's pretty friendly. You have a really good chance. They're not going to just give you the position. Um, they can maybe some schools would promise something, I don't know, but at the end of the day, you're going to play the guys that keep you hired, keep you from getting fired. So yeah, it's very hard to recruit to the transfer portal when you have so many starter capable guys. Like, if you don't come in and know the system and bring an immediate upgrade in our assignment sound, it's going to be really hard to beat out a Denzel Okafor or a Derek Kerstetter or Christian Jones, who already know the system, have some untapped upside, etc. So it's going to be very, very difficult for Texas to recruit guys to the transfer portal on offensive line unless they are really, really elite and capable of going anywhere and starting at their preferred position. So I don't anticipate that. There's not a super high need for it either. Like a top end NFL level talent would definitely help Texas, but a fringe, like a swing guard tackle type, well, you already have Karich and Kerstetter and Okafor. A center, well, a backup center would be really nice, but who's going to come into Texas to be a backup to Jake Majors? It's not a very appealing gig. It's very hard to backfill the roster when you have 6 or 7 guys on campus with a decent chance to play in the system.
Flood is more looking to get those NFL bodies on the next recruiting cycle, especially like targeting Kelvin Banks and a Devon Campbell. So zooming out, how has Sark's portal usage been unique in his first year?
Texas was very aggressive in the transfer portal this year. I think we will see the portal play a prominent role at Texas for the foreseeable future. Schools like Texas and Oklahoma, they can patch the roster. You have to be competitive every year at a school like Texas or Oklahoma. You can't have wasted years. I know that sounds harsh, but for a senior class, that's actually kind of nice. You can be guaranteed that your program's not going to throw in the towel and play a bunch of young guys when you're a senior. How many high school guys wish that their program had responded that way. So they'll be looking to patch holes, and they'll be looking to plug in elite talents when they can be had. I do not think we'll see something like this with a total roster makeover with the transfer portal unless there's a big scheme change or coordinator change in the future. So transfer portal has been very intriguing and interesting for Texas this offseason. In the future, it'll still play a role, but it will not be quite to this extent.
All hail the portal, man. Thanks for coming by and letting us know the transfer strategy and what to expect from the new guys. So make sure to go follow Ian over on Twitter. And Ian, let the viewers know where they can find your work, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. Everyone make sure to, read everything we have on Inside Texas and check out the Flyover Football Board, break down the rest of the Big 12 and some of the other teams in the region with the same level of detail. If you go there now, you can read about how Arkansas and Texas A&M look for this coming season, which I know Texas fans are probably at least begrudgingly interested in.
Yeah, man, I'm trying to see how Arkansas is looking for the new season. And that's a wrap for Ian and the Transfer Portal Breakdown. Watch more of my videos here and consider joining as a channel member. As always, hook 'em.